Hello everyone, welcome back to Football Manager 2017 and a new kind of experiment today. We're going to be using Arsenal again as we did in the last experiment, but this time round what we're going to try and see is what happens if we take away all of the Premier League's fans and stadiums. The idea of this is that Premier League players, these multi-millionaires, will be turning up to empty just fields, I guess. There'll be no real stadium, there'll be no seats, there'll be no fans. And to achieve this, what we've done is we've gone to the Premier League. We've picked out teams such as Arsenal, and then we've gone and edited the club's details so that they have no attendance whatsoever. There's no minimum attendance, no maximum attendance. There's just going to be one man turning up, and I presume it's the owner of whoever stadium they are supposed to be in. Now the facilities still have the same name, so it's still the Emirates Stadium. The capacity for this one is set at 750 when it should be 0, but I think that the game does auto set it to a certain number. The seating capacity goes down to 0, used capacity 0, expansion capacity 0, stadium condition 0, which is actually very good. 100 would be making it the worst, but I thought it would be easier for me to put in a 0 there. We've also destroyed their training facilities. They're all relegated to just a 1 point facility now. So that's kind of the changes we made. Originally I was just going to remove all of the fans and have them turn up to empty stadiums, but I have a feeling the game will use the club's reputation, which is still intact, and allow the club to rebuild very quickly, because obviously they have huge overseas followings and all the rest of it. So I thought I'd also get rid of the stadiums just to see what the teams will do. So what we're going to do is advance the game by 1 year, then 2 years, then 3 years, and then we're going to see are these teams still at the same stadiums? Are they playing in front of a man and his dog still? Or have they bought a new stadium? Have they got their fan base back? What are the average attendances? We're going to have a look at what happens to the Premier League when that happens. And if some of the other clubs that get promoted, so in this game usually Newcastle, see if they have an advantage, because they do still have all of the fans. Now there is also the interesting element that Tottenham are planning to move to a new stadium. They moved in there next season, so it's likely they will just continue to play where they are until next season, and then they are already moving into a big stadium. Chelsea have similar plans. Arsenal have just moved into a new stadium. West Ham, the big team to suffer here, because they have now lost their stadium. So if we have a look at their details, the London Stadium has a capacity of just 750, but they have no fans to come to it. It does look like the game has reset all of my zeros on the capacity to 750. I think that's a minimum for a stadium in the game, because I suppose you can get 750 people stand around a pitch in a field. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So let's advance it by 1 year and see where we are. So here we are, 1 year in the future, and I realised I made a slight mistake. I accidentally took Arsene Wenger's job when I started this save, but Arsenal won the league without them. Marcelo Bielsa has taken the job, or Bielsa. I can never really pronounce his name. And he's actually won the Premier League in his first season. Now, it's interesting to see the table isn't that different to where it was. Obviously, all these teams still have their best players, and it doesn't look like they've really gone anywhere. Jamie Vardy winning the top goal scorer, Mesut Ozil the highest average rating and the highest assists. But let's have a look at the stadium situation. If we click on this tab, we will see that Wembley is the biggest capacity stadium in use at the moment. Most teams are still at the same ones they were at that have absolutely no capacity. But Hull have gone to Oakwell. No idea where Oakwell is. They are now using that stadium. It was in Barnsley, apparently. Burnley have moved into Wigan's DW Stadium. They must be sharing that. Crystal Palace and Watford are stadium sharing at Craven Cottage, which is obviously Fulham's ground, so they must be sharing with Fulham. Leicester and West Brom are sharing at St Andrews in Birmingham. Chelsea have taken the Boleyn ground, which is pretty impressive. I didn't know they actually still kept that in the game, but apparently they've kept the Boleyn ground in the game and they've bought it instead of West Ham moving into it. Stoke have taken over Hillsborough, which is quite interesting, in Sheffield. And Arsenal and West Ham are sharing Wembley, which is interesting. I would have thought Tottenham would have taken over Wembley, but that is very interesting that they are sharing that stadium with the England team. So that's actually really interesting that all of the teams have moved into or most of the teams have moved into temporary accommodation. Everybody else staying where they are. I think there is a tab that allows us to look at the individual attendances. Yeah, this is the one. If we go to team details and then go down to attendances, we will see that the highest average attendance has gone to Manchester City. They're pulling in 21,000 fans. Arsenal pulling in 21,000 fans. Looks like the big sort of 4, 5, 6 teams are all getting back to where they were, because obviously you've got to remember that Arsenal and West Ham are in Wembley Stadium, but they are not filling that stadium at all. Or apparently they are. It says percentage of capacity is quite full, but that might be because they played a whole number of games at their former stadiums before getting the ground share situation. I think that's almost certainly what's happened, because I don't know how Swansea have got 102% capacity. They've also sold out 13 of the stadiums. If we have a look at the capacity, yeah, average attendance not high enough to justify the Wembley Stadium sellouts. But it's quite interesting. They have rebuilt their fans, but nowhere near the level where they were. Average attendance, the highest at Man City, 21,000. It's lowest at Bournemouth, which is maybe what you'd expect. A smaller reputation club, only 10,000 fans coming in there. But if we have a look at maybe the information screen for their facilities, we'll see that Arsenal's club attendance is now back up to 43,000, maximum club attendance of 46,000. If you have a look at their facilities, they are using Wembley. It looks like they're using it possibly for good, but they haven't upgraded any of their facilities yet, so they're still using some very dodgy facilities. And it's going to be interesting to see if they do develop them at any point. If we maybe take a quick look at Chelsea as well, just see if they've done anything. They're obviously taken over the Berlin ground, which does have some expansion capacity, which is quite useful for them, but they've not upgraded their facilities at all. It looks like everybody is focusing on the stadium situation. So let's go forward another year, because then we will have Newcastle in the game and other teams in the Premier League who won't have the stadium problems that the original 20 clubs have. Here is the second season of the Premier League, and Manchester United have won the league. Manchester United tend to develop into a very strong team in this game. Manchester City just behind them. Spurs and Arsenal also rounding out the top 4. The rest of the teams are kind of what you would expect. The teams going down: Watford, Hull and Wolves. Newcastle have managed to avoid relegation, and QPR have also managed to do the same, which is quite interesting. But let's jump over and look at the stadium situation. Wembley is now being ground shared with Spurs, so they still haven't moved into their own stadium yet. There must have been some delay on that, because it's usually the second season that they move in, but maybe some of you guys can let me know if that's right in the comments. Manchester City and Stoke have actually moved into the City of Manchester Stadium, which has a 73,500 capacity, which is very interesting. I'm not really sure what that stadium is. Is it the same one that Manchester City had before? Because I'm pretty sure it's called the Etihad in this game. So that's interesting. If they've bought a new stadium, no, it's built in 2002. It's definitely the City of Manchester Stadium. They've maybe just lost the naming rights to it. But Stoke are now playing at this stadium too. Newcastle have the third biggest stadium in the league. That's not a big surprise. St James's Park already a massive stadium. Chelsea ground sharing the Boleyn ground with Crystal Palace, so they've clearly not bought the ground. They're just renting it, I suppose. West Brom have moved into Pride Park. Wolves obviously have Molineux. Everton and Liverpool are ground sharing the DW Stadium, which is quite funny, because that's been an option for Everton and Liverpool when they were looking at whether to build a new stadium. That's been an option for a while, but they are finally doing it in Wigan. Burnley at the John Smith Stadium in Huddersfield. Bournemouth are now at the Den, so Bournemouth are having to go all the way from the south coast to London to play their games, sharing Millwall's stadium. Hull are at the Circle in Hull. That's their original stadium, which now has a capacity of 12,500. And it's the same for all these other teams down here. It looks like they've expanded their stadiums. If we take a look at Arsenal and have a look at their club details, they have indeed expanded the stadium, which apparently the expansion capacity wasn't that great, but apparently they've been able to do that. It must be some floors, or minimum floors as in something you walk on, not a floor as in a defect, but minimum floors for the settings that teams can build up to. The same at the 750 minimum capacity we saw at the start, but also being able to build up to a 12,500 seater stadium. But it's quite interesting that Manchester United and Arsenal have done that, because it sort of says to me that they're not looking to build a brand new stadium or move into one. I mean, Arsenal were using Wembley last season, and now they've had to downgrade to a 12,500 seater stadium, which is really quite interesting. And their fan base hasn't entirely recovered either. If we just have a quick look at that, you'll see it's only at maximum club attendance 52,500. The Emirates had a 60,000 capacity stadium, but if we have a look at West Ham, because they've had big stadium for a little while now, and they have a maximum club attendance of nearly 70,000, which is really quite interesting that they're higher up than Arsenal 2 years later. They've also upgraded their training facilities, which is quite interesting, and their corporate facilities, but I think that's just because it's linked to Wembley. But that is really quite interesting that West Ham now have a bigger fan base than Arsenal. It'll be interesting to see. I think the likes of Liverpool must be lacking at moving to a new stadium. Yes, they are. They're moving to a new Gerrard Stadium, 33,944 capacity. That's not for a couple of years yet, but it's still much smaller than the extended Anfield, which is now, I think, 60,000 people. But that is interesting that they're going to be moving to a Steven Gerrard Stadium. I assume Everton will be doing the same if we have a look at theirs. Due to move to the 35,200 Southall Stadium at around the same date. I wonder if West Ham are going to be doing that. Yeah, the 57,682 capacity Bobby Moore Stadium. So most of these teams look like they're building a new stadium. They're going to move into the new White Hart Lane imminently. Next month, Spurs move to the new White Hart Lane. Stoke must also be building a new stadium. They're going to move to the Sir Stanley Matthews Park, 25,000 seater stadium. Chelsea must be building quite an interesting one. They're going to move to the Lampard Arena. I wonder if John Terry was upset about that. 32,000. So most clubs are now looking to relocate to a new stadium, especially those that are actually renting. West Brom moving to a new one. So it looks like these clubs at the bottom are probably not going to be moving to a new club, new stadium. Just have a quick look at Manchester United. Yeah, they're not planning to move anywhere. But all of the teams that are actually renting somewhere, it seems to be because they're building a brand new stadium that they're going to move into. The other teams seem like they're pretty happy with where they are. So we're going to go forward one more year. Hopefully some of these teams will have, some of these bottom teams will have looked to build a new stadium. At the moment there's, I guess 9, no not 9. There's a few teams missing from this. Oh, it's because they're ground sharing. So there's 6 teams that are not planning to move to a new stadium. It'll be interesting to see if they actually change their minds about that at the end of next season. Here we are at the end of Season 3, and Arsenal are champions again, just pipping Manchester United to the top. Liverpool have managed to secure the top 4, Stoke finishing as high as 6th with their big stadium, West Ham dropping down to 11th, which is reasonably interesting. If we jump straight on and have a look at the stadium situation, West Ham now the sole occupants of Wembley because Spurs have moved into the new White Hart Lane. Both Man City and Stoke still sharing the City of Manchester Stadium. Newcastle obviously still up there. Chelsea and Palace still ground sharing at the Boleyn Ground. I assume both clubs are moving to a new stadium. We know that Chelsea are, but they're going to move to the Johnson, which I assume is named after Andrew Johnson. Move to the Johnson Stadium. West Brom we already know about. Fulham had Craven Cottage ground sharing for a little while, but that seems to be over. Everton and Liverpool still waiting to move to their new stadium. But Swansea are playing at Park E Scarlets, which is quite interesting. I assume they're moving to a new stadium then. They're going to move to the new Swansea Stadium in a couple of years' time. It looks like next season most of these teams will move to their brand new stadiums. But if we just have a look at the team stats and the attendances, and see which clubs are getting the highest attendances. It is West Ham who are topping the leaderboard for you West Ham fans out there. They've rebuilt their fan base the quickest. They're now at 63,717 average capacity. They only sold out Wembley twice. Spurs managed to sell out their new stadium 12 times. They've definitely rebuilt their fan base. Manchester City doing quite well. Newcastle have obviously retained theirs. They were selling that out in the Championship. It's no different in the Premier League, and they will have a big advantage because of that. Chelsea then, quite a long way behind the top four, and I think it's because these three teams at the top have had a big stadium for quite a while. West Ham obviously have had Wembley for a long time. Spurs have had the new White Hart Lane they've been looking for, but they were also sharing at Wembley. And City have had the City of Manchester Stadium. Stoke have also benefited from that. They're punching above their weight in 8th place. West Brom doing quite well as well, but the big teams are right at the bottom. They're selling out the stadiums, Arsenal, Leicester and Manchester United, but it's because they've got tiny stadiums. I mean, it's weird that Arsenal are getting 133% of their capacity, but I can only assume that's because they might have an exceptional fixture where they play a game at, say, Wembley or somewhere else when it's available. Otherwise, I've got no idea how they're going over capacity. Bottom of the table is Southampton, but they have the same number on the average attendance as Manchester United. So that's quite interesting that West Ham have rebuilt it the quickest, even though they also lost their brand new stadium and they're building a brand new Bobby Moore stadium. It's fascinating why they're at the top. I just don't really understand that because they've not actually performed that well in the league, but they've got that 70,000 possible position, and I honestly don't know why they've done so much better than everywhere else. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments why West Ham are doing so well. They're going to move into their new stadium in exactly 1 year's time. But I'm going to end this little experiment here. It's been quite an interesting one just to see what the clubs did in this situation, and it's absolutely fascinating that the likes of Man United and Arsenal are not even looking to build a new stadium as far as I'm aware. I think they're just happy where they are. Look, happy at Old Trafford and happy at the Emirates, even though they hold virtually no people. I can only assume they will be looking to move to a new stadium, but that they've focused on expansion of their existing one first. But it would be interesting to see where that developed in the future. If you want to see a second part to this experiment, you want to see where these clubs are when they've moved into their new stadiums, if Manchester United and Arsenal are going to do anything about their pretty crap stadiums, and if it has any long-term effects on where they finish in the league, especially for the likes of West Ham, who are going to be right up there in terms of biggest capacities, then let me know in the comments. Let me know if you want to see more of this. I would be interested in maybe pushing this sort of 5 years in the future and having a look on the longer term effects, but only if you guys are interested in seeing that. Let me know. Drop a like on this video if you've enjoyed the latest FM experiment, and let me know if you've got things that you'd like me to try, different ideas that I could have a look at. But until next time, see ya.